Good evening again, everyone. I hope everybody is all right. We are here once again tonight, the first meeting of 2025 in English. So that's the second Monday of the year and of the month too. And tonight I'm going to be here. I don't know if Nancy is there for her to read. She's there, so she will read a message and talk about the our daily bread message, and after that I'll be back to talk a little bit about the gospel according to Spiritism. And so that's how we usually do our meetings, either in Portuguese or in English. That's how we usually do. And then after that, we have the passes at the end of the meeting, and then we can all go home with a little bit more of blessings and in peace. So let's do our initial prayer, and then let's invite Nancy to be here with us. So in thinking about God, thinking about our dear friend Jesus, and asking the help of our spirit guides, they are usually and always helping us and together with us, walking around this earth, trying to learn a little bit more about the teachings of Jesus. So, dear God, thank you once again for being our lovely Father, our loving Mother, the one that gives, and will always give us life so that we can fulfill our own destinies, which is to love while being loved by you. May tonight your blessings fill our hearts, fill our souls with that love that we all need to lead a better life while doing our part in creating a better world for everybody. May your love reach us, reach deep within our hearts, so that we can not only hear the words, but that we may feel the message, so that we can, when we go back home tonight, that we can go back home with your peace, with your harmony, and most of all, with your love being felt by the deepest part of all of us. May your blessings always be with us. So be it. So, as I said, let's invite Nancy so she can read and make a brief comment about the message tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have from the book Our Daily Bread, from Emmanuel and Chico Xavier. The number of the reading is 171, and the title is The Law of Usage. When they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." This is in John 6:12. Once the law of usage is observed, misery will flee from the human path. To counter waste and selfishness, the work of each one of us is imperative, because once the equilibrium is identified, the service of economic justice will be complete, as long as goodwill exists among us. The excerpt from the Gospel that describes the task of feeding the multitudes signals important words of the Lord with regards to the leftover bread, transmitting a teaching of profound significance to the disciples. Generally, the earnest student in the first dazzling understanding of the revealing faith desires to undo himself in the meritorious activities, not based on true harmony. There we have, without a doubt, a laudable impulse, yet, even in the distribution of the material possessions, it is indispensable to avoid lack of control or excesses. The Father does not eliminate winter because of his children complain about the cold, but rather he equalizes the situation by giving them covers. Charity calls from enthusiasm. However, it also insists in generous discernment, so that the heart is not inclined toward indifference. In the great assembly of the needy of the Mount, with certainty there was no lack of lazy and reckless persons ready to render useless the remainder of the bread without just cause. However, Jesus, before the frivolous manifested themselves, clearly recommended, gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. This, as in everything, man should recognize that the usage is understandable in the law, despising abuse that is the mortal poison in all the fountains of life. I took some notes, and first I would like to say that this message is talking about the law of usage. And if we go to the Spirit's book, chapter 1, you will find more information about the laws, the universal laws in general. And but you will not find there specifically this name, law of usage. But we will find another laws, and it's interesting that this law of usage is kind of a within the other laws like conservation law, progress law, freedom law. If you pay attention how you use the things that the life brings to you, for example, our body, we have to pay attention the way we use our body, and the other research that comes to us. Here, Emmanuel gave the example of food. It's interesting if you go to the restaurants or you see other tables around you, people wasting a lot of food. And in Brazil it's a little different, but here we see big portions of food when you go to the restaurants, right? And of course, we have more waste because of that. The portions sometimes is too big. But and we remember when we were little kids, our mom used to say, "You have to, eat everything you have in your plate. There is other children they don't have anything to eat, blah blah blah." And we say, "Okay, mom, so give my plate to her, to him, or something like that." But what we have to pay attention, you cannot give your plate to children in Africa. You are here, for example. But what you have to do, you can pay attention when you prepare the food at home. Don't waste it. See the right portion for your family, the right size for your family. Maybe you will save some money or you will save some food at home. Then you can take that money or that food and give to anybody else or anybody in need. Another thing that I think was very interesting that he said here, Emmanuel said, God does not suppress winter because a few of his children complain about the cold, but rather he equalized the situation by giving them opportunities. So the winter is here. We are right now in the winter time. So God doesn't suppress the winter, but he gives us everything we need to get warm. We have raw material, we have the intelligence, we have the opportunity, we have strong arms and hands to do it, and we can do many things. We can make coats, blankets, boots, shelter, everything. So God will not take it out the winter. We have to learn how to deal with. And then finally, Jesus said, gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. I think this is the most important sentence in this reading. Let nothing be wasted. Our clothes, our food, our time, nothing, right? So then, is this the way the manual ends this message, saying kind of a pay attention, do not abuse of the resource you have, do not waste food, water, any items in general. I think this is the message. That's what I understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. So I'm back. So tonight we're going to talk about we're continuing the study of the Gospel according to Spiritism. So let's ask Jesus that he can shine light on our hearts, on our souls, and on our minds. And I'm going to talk a little bit about hearts, souls, and minds tonight because of the topic of tonight. So may he and the good spirits shine light on us. Because tonight we're giving continuation to chapter number 15 of the Gospel according to Spiritism. And the chapter 15 is without charity. Sorry, there is no salvation. That's the chapter that's right at the middle of the Gospel according to Spiritism. It's about the middle of it, and which is a very, very interesting place for it to be, because it actually it kind of really divide and is at the center of what Spiritism believes. It's right at the core of the beliefs of what we as Spiritists tend to think, and we focus a lot of the our actions and our teachings on charity, on what charity really means. And the chapter is has no other reason to be named as such than because, of course, of what Jesus taught us about charity. There's even a question on the Spirit's book, since Nancy already mentioned the Spirit's book here by citing the laws and title of her message, the law of usage. There's a question in the Spirit's book where Kardec asks the good spirits what Jesus thinks, or what, when Jesus would mention the word love or the word charity, what was he thinking about? What is his, as if Kardec is asking, what is the definition of charity according to Jesus? What is the definition of love, of charity according to Jesus? And the spirits give us the answer. It's benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness. So those are the three things that Jesus, that the spirits say that Jesus was thinking about: benevolence, being benevolent towards the other people, being indulgent towards other people's faults, and forgiving the offenses of other people towards us, or forgiving the offenses. So those are the three things that the spirits say that Jesus was thinking about. And his life, Jesus's life, was basically a big example of what is to be charitable to everything and to everyone that is around. To live having that idea of charity, of that idea of love being within you at all times, is, as we say, embodying that idea within yourself. I like to think that when you know how to do something, but you know very well how to do that something, you don't think about it anymore. You are that thing. You do that thing without even thinking about it, because it's what you are. So I can imagine that, for example, I mean, if I am, or anyone that doesn't play an instrument, for example, decides to play an instrument, decides to play the flute or the recorder, decides to play the guitar or a bass or whatever, a saxophone, whatever the instrument is, we don't even know at the beginning how to handle that instrument. We don't even know how to touch it, how to hold it, how to deal with that thing, because it's something that's exterior from us. It's something it's unknown. It's something that's strange. It's a strange body close to me. So, for example, first time that my older daughter, she was in school and they had to try to learn something too. And usually that's what happens here, right? You go to music school for a year or two when you're in middle school, and you pick an instrument. So she picked, because of my wife's influence, she picked the violin to try to learn. Had never, I mean, have always watched and seen a violin and on TV, on photos and there, but I've never like handled the violin. And it was at that time that I learned, for example, that you don't hold the violin while playing with your hands. Like a guitar, you put it here and you hold it, right? You have to hold it here. But you put it here, or you have to put it down on your lap if you're sitting down. But if you're playing the violin, you hold it with your chin. And you have, the first thing that you have to learn is how to hold the violin. It's so funny. I mean, in my mind, I never thought of it. I thought that when you were playing, you were holding it here. But no, you have to have it held here all the time. Because if you're, so imagine how your neck feels everything, right? It has a small cushion here, then you put it here. That's the first thing that you have to learn. Can you imagine, to play something? The first thing that you have to learn is how to hold the thing. It's not to play it, it's to hold it. But of course, I mean, the great players, it doesn't need to be like the world player, the best player in the world, world's best player, whoever. If you already learned how to start playing the violin, that thing is, you don't even have to think about it anymore. You have to know it. You have to put it here, hold it, find a position, and that's it. It needs to be there, and you don't have to think about it anymore. Because if you were thinking about holding it, how are you going to play it? So I'm thinking about the violin, but it doesn't need to be the violin. It can be anything else. So you have to take your mind out of that learning piece and go to the next learning, which is the notes and the shape of the bow and how to do this. And then you have to also in staccato, when you play without the bow, you play just like you're playing with you're playing a viola or a guitar. You can handle the strings by touching it like this too. It's another technique, and so many other techniques to do it. But for us to go from one to the other, you have to at least a little bit master the previous one so that you can learn the next one, and you learn the next one. But world-renowned violin players, they may have a lot of other worries, and they certainly have a lot of other worries. But when they are playing the violin, when they are playing the guitar, when they are playing the drums, when they whatever the instrument, and I will explain to you why I have all this music thing in my mind, why my examples will probably be a lot of music stuff tonight. They all have worries, they all have problems, everybody, right? Everyone has problems, has issues, has stuff that we have to deal with. But then you have that moment when you go up on stage and you have to deliver your music. You have to play your instrument, either by yourself if you're playing your own concert, or if you're in an orchestra, you have to be there with all the other guys, and you have to play like the other guys, so that everything is in harmony. Can you imagine if every violin player or every viola player, every oboe player would play a different thing? Nobody would understand anything. The music would not be music, would just be noise. Right? So it is interesting to think that when we want to and Jesus, coming back to Jesus, when Jesus was living here, and we can imagine or think about, people that reached a certain level in certain things, that when they are there doing what they're supposed to be doing, they're not worried about positioning the instrument. They're not worried about the basic stuff. They're just living. They're just playing their instrument. So when Jesus was here, by taking this idea of an orchestra or of an awesome saxophone player, when he is there playing, he is just, it is as if the instrument is part of himself. Right? Imagine a person that's playing like one of those big pianos, right? And he's sitting there playing. It almost feels like as if the piano is part of the person that's playing, that their hands are moving along, and they are, sometimes they play so fast they cannot even, probably not even see the keyboard anymore. It's like as if his hands or their hands or her hands are just like floating and going down at the right point without even thinking about. Same way as if, okay, I need to grab this. I don't think about, oh, my finger will do this, my other finger will do this, so I'll put a little strength and hold it. No, I'm not thinking about it. I'm just doing it, taking it, grabbing it, right? We don't think about this. When we were young, and we didn't know how to write our own names. Some people, even at old age, don't know how to write their own names, or they think they know, but when we read, we cannot understand. So maybe they don't know, they're just faking, right? Their handwriting is so bad that we cannot read it. So maybe they don't know how to write and they're just faking it. But taking away that, or joking aside, there was a time when we grabbed a pen to write our name, and the only thing that would come out would be squiggles, because we thought that we were writing something, but we were not. It took us how many years? Maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 years to learn how to write our name. But when we want to write our names today, do we think about it? We don't. We just grab a pen, and if we need to write, we'll just write it. That's it. So it's part of ourselves. So once again, when Jesus comes to us, and when he comes to exemplify, to live with us, he comes to show us what it is to love. Not as if he's trying to show off, but as something that's what he came here to do. As if one day we said, okay, I need a great piano player, so let's hire the best one out there so that we can see him play. And then maybe one day we will be able to play like him because we like the way he plays. And then we will play like him. So, when we talk about charity, and we think about, and that's one of the reasons why Kardec asks that question, why or how or what would Jesus think when he was talking about love, when he was thinking about charity? Why did Kardec ask that question? And to me, this is one of the ways to explain it. It's because he, out of everyone else in the world, maybe Jesus was the person that knew the best how to explain it, or how to live it, how to be charity, how to be love. Not how to show love, but how to be or become love. And Kardec, for that reason, maybe saw this, or not, I won't say maybe, because that's what he saw, and that's why he put chapter 15 right in the middle of the Gospel according to Spiritism, kind of mimicking what the Jewish tradition has when they talk about important things in life. I don't know if you've ever been to a Catholic mass or to a Catholic church to hear a priest preaching, and there's a sentence that they say sometimes when they are preaching and asking people to repeat what he's saying. There's one sentence in the middle of the mass, and at certain points where he says, and he is in the middle of us. He is amongst us. He is. I don't know exactly what the words would be in English, but in Portuguese they will say literally, e ele está no meio de nós. And he is amongst us. He is right at the center of us. It could be between. I don't know how they say it. That's why I never heard it in English, how a mass goes. So maybe they change a little bit the words, but it could be something like this. So this, and we have the same kind of concept in everything, that everything that's in the middle, it's almost as if it's what's the most important part, is the core. It's what supports us, right? So when we think about the old traditions, and we think about how the Jews would read their texts, So let's grab a book from the Old Testament, Isaiah or Jeremiah, whatever one of these old books. And they would have not books like this, of course, because these books in this shape is something that we invented much, much later. But originally, the books were the scrolls, right? Things that we would roll and they would be rolled. And sometimes even in synagogues today, they still have some rolls and so on. So what is interesting is that they don't roll like one side being very little and the other side being very thick. They usually roll it they are both the same size. When you roll it, both sides of the roll have the same thickness. So they are like this, right? Two balls like this. So the most important part of this text is right in the middle. So when you open the first part that you see is the most important part of the book. And it's interesting that Kardec puts right in the middle of the Gospel according to Spiritism this chapter, which is called "Without Charity There Is No Salvation," as if to say, okay, here is this is the center of our teaching. Everything leads to this. From this side to this, from this side to this, everything leads to this. And these specific items that we are talking about tonight, which is the greatest commandment, is where actually Kardec writes the title of the chapter, and he defines it. So the last sentence of the one paragraph that he writes ends with, "Without charity, there is no salvation." So it is these two pieces that I'm going to read that define what is the greatest commandment. And of course, if we're talking about charity, the greatest commandment is charity, or without charity, there is no salvation, according to how Kardec writes about. So this whole chapter is a very small chapter in terms of size, but it's a very deep chapter. So this chapter in this translation here has only 5 pages. So we can read it in maybe less than 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But it has the power to change our lives, but to change it deeply. Because there's a lot of things, of course, in what it is. I'm going to read these verses from the Bible that Kardec cites here, because I think they are very, very curious and very, very interesting. Jesus has been teaching around town. I'm not sure, probably in Jerusalem at some point. So he is teaching. He had some teachings about resurrection, some teachings about other stuff. And he has been like teaching stuff that people are asking him. So people ask about marriage, people ask about resurrection, people ask about a few things in this chapter of Matthew, chapter 22. Comes to getting close to the end of the chapter, and then I'm going to read. But having found out that he had put the Sadducees to silence, the Pharisees got together. So he says, what Matthew is narrating here is that the Sadducees, which is a group of people that are they're also Jewish, but they have certain beliefs that are a little different than the most of the Jews. And they came to ask, like, to test Jesus, if Jesus knew, if Jesus was really like a prophet or something. And then with the answers that Jesus gave them, they couldn't do anything else. They had to be quiet and go home, because they were trying to do a little prank on Jesus. And with Jesus's response, they just said, "Hey, let's put our tail between our legs and let's go home. Otherwise," right? But the Pharisees, which is another group of Jews, heard this. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were not like friends. So they said, "Oh, okay, so Jesus shut the Sadducees' mouth. So now we are going there and try to catch Jesus. So that's what the Pharisees came to do. They were all trying to catch Jesus. One of them, who was a doctor of the law, and a doctor of the law is a person that studies, let's say, if it were a Catholic, it would be probably a bishop or a priest, someone that studied a lot of what being Catholic means. If it were whatever, if it were a scientist, it was like probably a scientist that got a Nobel Prize. It was someone that really knew about the stuff that they. So that comes this doctor of the law, and came to ask this question of him in order to test him. So he didn't come to ask a question because he was curious about the answer. He came to ask a question to test. You know those students, I don't know if you were students like this, but comes a teacher, the teacher is there teaching their class. The student tries to be like smartass, right? Tries to be like the smart one, and he comes to class. Like when I look at Marcos, I look at him and I see him like this, right? Coming to test the teacher. He comes to test the professor, just to know, let me see if this guy, he knows what he's talking about. I'm looking at him right now, right there. He's laughing. No, I probably would be more like that than Marcos, I guess. So he comes in. There was a teacher of mine that he would say, I look at you, and he would look at all of us in class. I know that some of you have a question, and you have that question right in your pocket. You're just waiting to get that question out of the pocket and ask me the question. That's what the Pharisees were trying to do. They were trying to test the teacher. They were not there to learn. And there is a big difference, right? When you're interested in learning, you're not there asking to test the teacher. You're asking because you want to know. You want to have that question. You already gave thought of that, and you ask questions because you're really interested in having that knowledge, not just to have the knowledge. But if you already gave the next step, it's not just to know about it, but it's to know it and put it into practice. So the Pharisees were not there to know it and put it into practice. They wanted to know if Jesus was a Jew or not. And that's in the end, at least as far as we understand, why he was killed. He knew so much about it. But they were in contradiction of what the Jews in general thought that the law was, that they grabbed him and crucified him to get rid of him because he was teaching love. But it's not only love for the ones who I love, it's love for everybody. But that's another story. So, Master, they ask, Master, what is the greatest commandment of the law? I mean, if a doctor of the law doesn't know that, shouldn't be even a doctor of the law, because this is basic to a doctor of the law. So Jesus replies, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. That is the greatest and the first commandment. So they knew it. They knew what was the greatest commandment, and they knew what was the first commandment. It's a knowledge that everybody Even need to be a doctor of the law to know about it, because that was, say, common knowledge against or among the Jews of the time. Even us today, 2,000 years after that, we know the first commandment: love your God above everything, blah blah blah. And maybe we don't know the whole text, but we know that love God above everything else. We know that piece. But then Jesus doesn't stop there. He goes and says, and here is the second. So he gives the greatest, and he says, this is not only the greatest, but it's the first. And then here's the second greatest. And here's the second. But there's a, let's say, not a catch, but there's something that Jesus adds to this answer that I find very interesting. He says, which is similar. Some people translate, or some people say, which is equal, which is the same thing as the other one. But it's not, it's similar. It's close. And I'll explain why I like that little word there. There's word there. You, that's the second one, which is similar to the first. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. All the law, every single law, and Adriana just mentioned here, oh, sorry, Nancy just mentioned here, right? The law of usage, yeah, the law of usage. And so he says, all the law, every law that exists in the universe, all the law and the prophets are contained, are inside those two commandments. Everything is inside those two commandments. And he says, he doesn't say love 3 times, but he says it twice. But the second part, it is as if we could repeat the word love for the 3rd time. So in the 2 commandments, we kind of hear the word love 3 times. Love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And you shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. So it's love, love, love. So, and if these 2 commandments merged together contain every other law, both commandments together are the greatest commandment. And that's where Kardec stops the transcription from the Bible. I said that I was going to mention a few things of this passage. And the first is that part of the similar part. When I say that something is equal, there is basically no difference of these 2 things. If something is similar, the word shows us that there's something that is almost equal, but it's not exactly. But sometimes, because we don't understand one, it's better to have the other so that we can understand the other one. Because it is very hard for us in the level that we are to understand and really understand what it is to love God above everything else. How can we love something that we don't understand? How can we love someone that we don't understand, that we have no concept, that every definition that we try to to come up with, it lacks something. It is as if something is missing for us to understand it. It's so abstract. It's something that's so kind of far away, so out there, that it's kind of hard for us to understand it. What Jesus does, though, is that he brings God closer to us. He brings God to a level when he calls God not our Lord at all times. He calls it Lord sometimes, but he calls God our Father. So he brings God down to us so that we can kind of feel God right there. And then in the 10 Commandments, it says we have, and that was the chapter right before that, if I'm not mistaken, chapter 14 is honor your father and your mother. So it is as if Jesus is trying to make us be closer to God by bringing God to our family so that we can kind of relate to God in that sense, so that we can learn at least a little bit of how to love God. However, not everybody believes in God. So I think that maybe he was thinking a little bit about this when he gave the second part of the answer. Because it was as if, okay, I know that some people will not believe in God, will have a hard time understanding God. And so how can I love something that I don't understand? So he says, here is something that's similar to that greatest commandment, so that you can maybe one day understand the first one when you understand the second one. But even the second one is hard to understand too. Love yourself. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So you see the sequence is God, the neighbor, and yourself. That's the sequence. That's how Jesus teaches us. That's what he points at us, to us, right? It's a cycle. And we have to pay attention to how we do it. We have to really pay attention to how we do it. We really tend to use the examples of Gandhi. We use the example of Mother Teresa. We use the example of Jesus. We use the example of a lot of people that loved others. But when we talk about ourselves, we tend to say, or we hear people saying a lot, that we first need to learn how to love ourselves so that we can learn how to love others. What does that mean? We're not here to discuss necessarily what that means, but if we get stuck in learning to love me, how am I going to be able to love another one if I don't get out of myself? If I don't go out of myself to do something for the other? Even if I don't love me yet, because I don't love myself yet the way I think I should. But if I stop and don't do anything, what am I doing? You see, so it's to me, it's kind of a trap that we have to be aware of. Because Jesus says, love your neighbor. He says, love your neighbor. That's the word that he uses. And he is not even teaching this to us based on himself. He's teaching this to us based on the law, because these two sentences that he cites, these are old laws from the Old Testament. He's not creating these laws. He's just grabbing these laws from the Old Testament and he say, this law is correct. this law is what I think is correct. That's what he's saying when he repeats it. So we have to decide, what do we need to love first? It's God, the neighbors, and us. There will be a point where we might put these three almost at the same level. It's probably, how can I say this? It's probably an utopia to think that one day we will love God above everything else. But if we take this teaching at face value, at what the teaching is saying, we can see how and why Jesus let himself be caught and be killed. Or don't we think that Jesus, if he wanted, he could have avoided being killed? If he wanted, nobody would catch him. Nobody would bring him and put him onto the cross. No one. Zero people. So he did that because he loved himself more than his neighbor and more than God? Or was the other way around? Because he loved God above what he loved himself and above what he loved the other. You see what I mean? Not saying that we should allow or let other people kill me before I'm able to do something. That's not what I'm saying. We have to protect ourselves, period. What I'm saying is, we sometimes tend to not to see this when we are facing our friends, facing our neighbors. We tend to put ourselves on top of the other. We tend to put ourselves better than what the other one is. And then we use whatever excuse or whatever justification that we want to use. He or she didn't respect me, so I'm not respecting you. Why? Exactly. So you're not being respected by the other, and then all of a sudden you do the same thing back? How is this love? And I'm not saying that it is easy. I'm not saying that we won't fall sometimes, that we will not. No, I'm not saying this. What I'm saying is, if we don't have this great commandment in our minds, we will always put ourselves first, always. Because that's selfishness. That's who we are. That's pride and selfishness above love. Because it's me. If I'm disrespected, I deserve respect. But we know that we deserve the respect. It's not about deserving. It's about, okay, the person didn't give me respect. The person didn't give me love. And then what do? I give it back. So Jesus says it in another point, love your enemies. And then he compliments by saying, what am I doing if I only love the ones who love me? It's exactly the same teaching said in a different way. But no, that's not how we live. And when I say we, I'm included in it. We ourselves, we are more important than any other person in the world. Maybe sometimes the mothers put their kids before them. Maybe sometimes. Not all the time. Not all mothers. But maybe. But Kardec says that. He says, he starts by saying this, charity and humility. That is the sole path to salvation. Selfishness and pride, that is the sole path to perdition. To get lost. Because it's usually what it is. That's why the order is the one that Jesus says. because we put ourselves at the first place. It's always us. It's always us. We can look in anywhere, in almost any action. It's always us. And I'll go further. I've been saying this a few times, I guess, in the past month or so, or a few meetings or so. When André Luiz goes to Nosso Lar and they're talking about family, and one of the spirits there tell him that one of our big problems is because we put our family above all other families, which is the same idea. Which is the same idea. Not saying that our family, we shouldn't care of our family. No, it's not that. But we have to think about these things. We really have to think about these things. We really have to think in who or what I am putting first in my life. And if we are trying to understand what is selfishness and what is pride, we have to be aware that that's who and what we are. We are still selfish and pride. I was listening to this interview this past week with Fernanda Torres, right? She won the Golden Globe for actress and so on. So before she won, there were some interviews. They were like, they go out to to promote the movie, and people are interviewing all around the world. And she was here, and she was interviewed by a TV about the movie. And of course, she didn't know that she was going to win. It was before So there was a question from the interviewer, and she said, what is one thing that you do when you're there acting, when you're doing, like, in a group with people? What's one thing that you do that you find to be interesting? And she asked, like, it was a longer question. And what one thing that you do that you wish you didn't do, and one thing that you do that you like to do that helps the process? And she says, one thing that I know that I do is I like to make people enjoy the environment of the work environment where we are working, so that we all feel part of it, and we are enjoying doing there. So I think that and then that's more or less how she said it. I think that I am able to do this. I feel I put people at ease, and they like to come to work. They like to work. We like to work together, and I'm one that to do this. And then she stops and she says, and I don't do this for myself. That's what she says. And as soon as she says that, she says, no, I do it for myself too. And then she stops again and she says, well, because of course it's for myself too, because I'm selfish. I am selfish too. But it's not just for myself. It's because I feel like, although I like it, but it's for everybody, and everybody likes to be together, and we make the set come alive, and we make the set work together better and easier. And but I loved when she stopped and she said, not in a selfish way. And she said, no, but it's selfish as well, because, I am selfish. I'm not saying that I'm not selfish. I am selfish. And she repeated it a few times. And by realizing that, and I'm trying to really see, and I love the interview, but because of so many little things that she said, but this specific thing, when she said that, she said, I thought to myself, that is what it means to me to know yourself, or being in the way of recognizing yourself, that you have that problem. And when we recognize that we have that issue, we can step forward. We can move forward and say, okay, so I'm still doing this. But even if I am selfish at that point, if I'm doing something that gives me pleasure, but I'm doing it for everybody else, how bad can that be? So you start to think, and then you say, okay, so that's not being selfish. But for me, who I am aware of myself, I see that. So when Jesus says, love your God above everything else, love your neighbor, and love yourself, he's trying to make us go away from that pride and that selfishness while working with others, for others, and on top of everything else, working for God and with God for everything else. Trying to pull us out of ourselves in that sense. Trying not to make me the center of everything. Jesus is in the center. God is in the center. That's basically what it is that he is trying to teach us. So, and so to wrap it up, I will just give some food for thought on one more thing. When Jesus says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, he cites three things. For the Jew at the time, heart, today when we say, oh, I'm thinking about something, if we were to pick an image of what is thinking, we would probably put our brains, right? Our mind, where something is being thought. At the time of Jesus, the heart was what thought. So the heart means thought and spiritual life. So when he says that we have to love God with all our heart, it means you have to think about God and live your spiritual life with God all the time. And then he says, with all your soul. Soul is probably what today we say our heart, because when we say our hearts, it's the emotion. It's where our emotions are. So our soul for the Jews was with our emotion. And when he says mind, he's talking about action, not just in thoughts and in emotion, but also in action. So when Jesus says that love our God is the top commandment, it's not just in our thoughts. It's not just in our hearts. It's in our thoughts, in our hearts, and with our hands, meaning acting, doing physically something. So, as I've been saying a few times, when we, if we can, you see, it's the part that we spoke tonight. It's just this piece here. It's less than a page. Less than a page. So you can read it like in 2 minutes, I guess. But I didn't even read the rest of what Kardec said here. So there's so much more for us to think about. But I think that the most important part is not about thinking about it. It's not about feeling it. It's about practicing it. It's about putting this idea of love, of charity in action. As Kardec says at the end, without charity, there is no salvation. Without us loving one another, loving ourselves, but above all, loving God, we are we're still stuck because we are putting other stuff before what is really, really important. So I thank you all for the patience, for the attention. I like to thank everybody that's at home. I don't know how many, but maybe they will watch it later. But for this week, I'd like to remind everyone that on Saturday, this next Saturday, the Benjamin Franklin Spiritist Society will reopen its doors. It will be in Tewksbury. The address is right here at this flyer. If you can, and if you want to go, from 10 a.m. it will be like a meeting in the morning, and in the afternoon they will go out to do a foot drive and help some people that need in the town of Tewksbury, well, actually in Lowell. So they will open at 10. There will be a coffee and a welcome morning. Then there will be a talk about Benjamin Franklin and Spiritism in America. And then after that, there will be a reflection about without charity, there is no salvation. So it will be this it's funny because I saw this morning, but I didn't read it again. And now that I'm reading, I'm just so from 10 to noon, it will be about 2 hours in the morning. There will be pizza and salad. So if you don't go for the message, go for the food. I'm just kidding. But if you want to go, I mean, there's a phone number to our RSVP, because maybe they don't know how many people will go. But once again, it's a reopening of this Spiritist Society that I don't know how many years, but they closed a while ago because everybody moved from where they were doing stuff, and then the Spiritist Center like closed its doors, and they're opening again. So if we can go, if we're so it will be good. I will be there to give them my hug, because I think it's one more spot of light. One more spot of light is always important. So having said that, let's finish our meeting, and hope we're going to have some passes there, and we will be back for next week here and on Saturday as well. So now it's just a time to thank God, thank the good spirits, and thank Jesus for allowing us to be here once again on this earth, to do our jobs, to be part of this community of loving people, of people that love, of people that spread the good word, of people that spread the love through actions, so that we can do our little part in helping this world become a better place. So we would like to thank Jesus for all the love, all the support, all the blessings that we receive from our families, from the jobs that we have, the jobs that we hold, so that we can perform our tasks, and ask him to help us on our struggles, on our daily problems, on our daily issues, holding our heads up high and showing us and making clear for us that everything and everybody has their issues. We're still here, Jesus, in this material world where we face so many issues and so many problems, but also we see so many good things, and we see so many beautiful things. So open up our eyes for us to see and feel more the goodness of the world instead of the bad part. Make us spread our wings and fly above these small issues, so that when we stop at our houses, we have our heart hearts full of gratitude, full of hope, and full of joy. May you be with us, not only tonight, but always. So be it. So yeah, thank you. And we'll be back soon. Next month, Lucas will be here, hopefully, to do the meeting in English. Love hearing him. So, we're gonna have the passes. Yeah. So.